Hi, welcome to our weekly live stream. I am Daniella Young, writer, TEDx speaker, and co-founder of Cadmus HR, an HR tech company, which I'll tell you all about after this. Every Tuesday at 12:30 Seattle time, 2:30 Central, I publish a blog post and then do a live discussion about some kind of issue that has to do with culture, leadership, HR, and any and everything surrounding those topics. Today and the first Tuesday of every month, I do a book review, some sort of professional book that I have been reading, again, along one of those topics that I think is a great book and I would like to share with clients, listeners, and all of you. So today I'm discussing a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think is how his name is pronounced. This book is super awesome, and one note is if you look at the cover, it looks very scientific and very convoluted and confusing. Basically bad cover design, but quite a powerful read and actually really easy and fun to read because he does what I really enjoy with some of these prescriptive leadership or culture books is that he uses a lot of case studies and is essentially telling stories to help us understand his point. And his point is to talk about habit, which is understanding scientifically how the habit loop works, and then how you can take that and then use that to self-discipline individuals, organizations, and societies. And he goes through all three of these in different parts of the book. So the habit loop comes down to this scientific process that he describes called cue, routine, and reward that all humans and even some other animals follow consciously or subconsciously when you're doing anything. And the whole point of this book is if you can understand the habit loop enough to elevate your actions to a conscious level, then you can change that behavior. And we'll get a little bit more into that. So the habit loop is this very powerful tool, right? Because you can create new habits, but you can also change existing habits. And Duhigg talks about this for individuals as well as for societies. But it's not like we don't have any habits. Everyone has habits. Every organization has habits, every individual and every society. It's just whether you build them on purpose or not. For example, I bite my nails. I did not do that on purpose. I still have not been able to quit my whole life. But it is very much a habit. Now, I'm also a runner. Many of us love to work out. That is probably much more of a conscious habit that we built during our adult lives that we had to focus on. So whether you knew about the habit loop and the details and understand the science or not, you do this every day and all the time. And then he especially talks about interesting keystone habits, which could be things like exercising, running, etc., or something like quitting smoking, which are things that as we do it, so quit smoking, we realize we can quit smoking, so we look for other things that we can change and improve in our lives. We're also probably going to realize how much time we're wasting on smoking, and so then we'll start looking at time management. We might realize how much money we were wasting by smoking, and so we'll start learning about investing. We'll get better sleep patterns, we'll start eating better, we'll start exercising more. And so something like quitting smoking can become this keystone habits that changes all of these other things that don't seem to be related. And I'm a huge believer of this because I did exactly that. Quit smoking, start exercising, and become a much, much healthier person, and many of these other things that go along with that. Duhigg spends a lot of time talking about willpower also, which of course you can expect for a book on habit, but from this very scientific angle. And he talks about how scientists and researchers have, what kind of research they've done to try to understand willpower. So as I mentioned, this book is full of stories. Definitely check it out and read it. He talks about 4 things in willpower as a muscle. One is that willpower is a muscle. 2 is that because it's a muscle, it gets tired. So they've done these studies on willpower showing that you have more ability to use your willpower when you haven't used it that much that day, which is, for example, one reason that a lot of us struggle to go work out after a long day of work, but have no problem doing it first thing in the morning. Number 3 is a sense of agency greatly affects the way that people experience their willpower, which means if you give people, your employees, for example, more choice over which work or which habit or which willpower they want to use, they will work harder. And then 4, just like any muscle, and just like as a muscle willpower gets tired, willpower can also be strengthened. We just have to build the habits, which is, of course, what this whole book is built on. So after talking about individuals and spending a good portion of this book laying that out, we get to the habits of organizations. And this is where the book really switches from becoming kind of an individual self-help book to becoming a leadership tool, to becoming an organizational culture tool, because he makes the same case that organizations have habits, and those are also built either consciously or unconsciously. We usually call them patterns, we call them processes, we might call them, this is the way things have always been done. But those are habits. He says that destructional organizational habits can be found everywhere. And they're almost always the product of thoughtlessness of leaders who avoid thinking about the culture, and so they let it develop without guidance. He says there are no organizations without institutional habits. There are only places where they are deliberately designed, or places where they're created without forethought. And so they grow from rivalries or fear. Of course, I love this quote because it's similar to what I tell my clients a lot, that you're either building your culture on purpose with a plan, or you're building it off purpose. It's not like you choose to just get to have no culture. So, I think this is a very sobering thought. This is why I think this is such a good book for business leaders to spend time reading and really thinking about, and asking yourself, how much time do you spend thinking about your organization's habits? Do you know what they are? Could you diagram them out into this habit loop that Charles Duhigg shows in the book, and then explain to your employees the cue, routine, and response that everybody's operating with? Do you know what the keystone habits are within your organization? And are those habits then in line with your values and your culture, or did they just come together, everything sort of accidentally? The final section of this book now gets even broader with talking about habits of societies. And this is really when the author, Mr. Duhigg, is challenging everyone to get involved in being part of that conscious effort to build great habits into our societies. He uses an example of the civil rights movement and how that the Montgomery boycott helped kick the civil rights movement into gear. Civil rights movement helped end segregation. That helped to change the culture in a pretty significant way. Though, of course, racism is something we still struggle with. Just want to acknowledge that. He definitely describes this idea of strong ties and weak ties within a community or culture, and how leaders who understand habit, peer pressure, and human beings' communal nature can affect large-scale change. And so, of course, if you've listened to me before, you know that I love to talk about communes and communal nature and how human beings are driven to operate as group animals. This is why this book can be so important for everyone to read, whether you are a group leader or currently a group member. Definitely, this book is full of very interesting food for thought, including things like how responsible are we for our habits, and how responsible are we to change our habits. And he tells this really interesting 2 stories set up together of a man who was such a bad sleepwalker that he actually strangled his wife to death in the middle of the night, and ends up being acquitted by a jury of his peers, versus a woman who is such an addictive gambler that she gambles away millions of dollars and is, trying to get her bankruptcy dismissed by claiming that it's a habit and it wasn't her fault. She does get, convicted, or whatever it's called. Basically, she is held responsible by the jury of her peers. And it comes back to this idea that is sort of the whole challenge of this book. And it's that we know as humans that once you understand your actions, we hold you responsible for those actions. And so the poor dude who murdered his wife while sleepwalking was not assumed to be responsible because he wasn't aware of his actions. Whereas the woman who was gambling, alcoholics, other people that have horribly harmful habits, we do hold them responsible for their actions as a society. And really one of his final points, which I love, is just that these two stories is the whole point of the book. Once you understand habits, you can change. You have the freedom and you also have the responsibility to change your habits. Once you understand that habits can be rebuilt, the power of habit becomes easier to grasp, and the only option left is to get to work. So in conclusion, of course, since I am doing a review about this book, I recommend this book. I think it's really worth the time of reading it, thinking about it, writing down some quotes that stand out to you, and then going back and reviewing them later, like I've just done today, which caused me to think of so many additional interesting and important things, and definitely well worth your time. Thanks again for watching. Once again, I am Daniella Mestenek-Young, TEDx speaker, author, combat veteran, and co-founder of Cabinets HR. Cabinets HR is a virtual HR tech company where we are trying to take the challenges of providing HR to big businesses and make that accessible to small businesses. We're doing this through a combination of virtual online consulting, through creating technology and products around some automated services that currently are mostly done by in-person HR consultants or in-person full-time employees at businesses. In the United States, small businesses lose $27 billion a year, and that's a mild estimate, by not having the right kind of HR. Here we are, and we're hoping to change that. So follow us on social media. We do a lot of great free content, including discussions on HR, on culture, on leadership, lots of tips, lots of tricks. We have several amazing podcasts that you can follow. We were on Twitter and on everything else. If you're interested in following me as an author, check out my website, DanielaMestenekYoung.com, and you can follow me on Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn to see and hear all of the things that I am writing and talking about. Thank you so much, and remember to be great every day.